going to be talking about microneedling for hair growth. This is kind of insane. The more research and data I went into this, the more I realized that microneedling is the way to grow your hair. Okay, so in today's agenda, I'll go through what makes me an expert in microneedling, the stages of hair growth, how microneedling supports hair growth, clinical data behind microneedling and hair growth. There's so many studies for hair growth and microneedling, who it's best used for, how to use. I'll do a quick demo, how often to use, benefits, what not to use, and your final takeaway. All right. So a little bit about my story. I've been creating microneedling devices for over 13 years. So I have not done anything else but really focus over 13 years on microneedling devices. And the reason why I started Banish was because I've always had really bad acne, really bad acne scarring. I tried out so many different products for my skin. Nothing would work. Went to so many different dermatologists. For over 15 years, I really struggled with my skin and my acne. And so when it came time to pick out what I wanted to do when I grew up, I wanted to be a dermatologist. So I went to Duke University to study pre-med. And while my time at Duke, I actually created my YouTube channel, which I started reviewing different beauty products. And when I was taking, organic chemistry and statistics and going into the labs, I learned how to read clinical journals. And I would go through the ingredients in skincare products and go through every single ingredient and tell you what it was for, why it was there. And I soon realized a lot of the skincare products out there, they put a lot of stuff to increase the volume or the fragrance of the product, but it didn't actually do anything to the skin. So I was personally shocked at how products were formulated just for the look, but not actually efficacious into the skin. So I've always been, from day one, really into the studies and into the science and only creating products that have a reason to be there, okay? So I started creating my own products and my acne started to go away, but I was left with a ton of scarring, okay? And that's kind of why the brand is called Banish Acne Scars. And I wanted to get my skin lasered, and I saved, a few $1,000s to get my skin lasered. And I went to a family friend plastic surgeon who told me, Daisy, I cannot take your money because my skin type, because my skin actually has a very faulty barrier, which is why I have acne and I overreact to everything. So not only would it not treat my skin, but it would actually make my scarring worse. I would develop hyperpigmentation, all that stuff from the lasers. So he actually said, do microneedling, put a vitamin C, specifically with L-ascorbic acid on top, and that will help your scarring. So I did that, and before I knew it, everyone on my YouTube channel started commenting about my skin. They wanted to buy whatever I was using because they saw on my YouTube channel the difference and the trajectory of my skin, and they were like, I'll buy whatever it is. So that is how Banish started. So initially in 2012, Banish was, and that was over 13 years ago, Banish was for acne scars, right? Banish Acne Scars. So I have been creating microneedling devices, and, we started with many different iterations of Banish, from the Banisher to the rollers to the stamper device, Banisher 2.0, Banisher 3.0 with replacement heads. And I'm going to tell you guys a top secret thing. We are working on different kinds of replacement heads, but I've always wanted to create the best, safest at-home microneedling products. So I've been doing that for over 13 years, and I was awarded a lot of accolades for this. Forbes 30 Under 30, Inc. 500. I did a TEDx talk, but microneedling device and everything about microneedling is all I know. So at Banish, we don't sell any other skincare that much or makeup or anything else. We just focus on microneedling. So I will be honest, I have not had issues with hair loss. Okay, I've had issues with my skin, but my hair has always been something that has cooperated with me, as you can see here. But actually, after having my baby, specifically my second baby, I experienced postpartum hair loss, and I would get clumps of hair everywhere. Like even to this day, like my shower drain, I have to snake it twice a week. Just clumps everywhere, like it's just everywhere, right? And this is when I started to become interesting in microneedling for hair growth, because I heard that people would do this for hair regrowth. And you can even see here, I have a bunch of baby hairs here from the postpartum hair loss and all that. Okay, so before we get into how microneedling helps, we need to understand how hair grows, okay? So I had to brush up on my biology classes, but hair goes through 4 different phases of hair growth. First is the anagen phase. So most of your hair is in the anagen phase. 85 to 90% of your hair is in this phase, and this is where the cells divide rapidly in the hair follicle, producing the new hair. Then it goes to the catagen phase. So this is a 2 to 3 week transition phase where the hair follicle shrinks and the growth stops. So the hair is starting to detach from the blood supply. So that is like when you shed, right? That's starting to happen. Then it goes through the telogen phase, which that hair follicle is basically chilling. Okay. And then a new younger hair may start growing while that hair is dormant. And then the final phase is the old hair falls out to make way for new hair. This is considered part of the normal shedding process. So you actually shed up to 50 to 100 hairs a day, which I think is crazy because I think I shed about 1,000 hairs per day, but your hair is constantly shedding, right? It's not like it just stays there. And that is why over the course of your life, you see different changes in hair quality. So different factors affecting the cycle. So duration, right? The length of the anagen phase is determined by genetics, nutrition, age, and overall health. So you've noticed that, like, for example, if you are stressed, if you go through hormonal changes, i.e. postpartum, poor nutrition, different health issues, the follicles of the hair can prematurely go into the telogen phase, causing increased shedding, okay? And also, just like with your skin, where your collagen actually decreases 1%, the production of collagen decreases 1% every single year, the anagen phase also decreases with age. So this is why when you get older, your hair grows slower. Your hair cannot grow any longer, right? Some people cannot actually grow their hair longer because that is resulted by the anagen phase and it changes, okay? So that process is called miniaturization. So over time, that hair follicle produces weaker and shorter hair and eventually stops producing hair. And this is kind of very common in the signs of aging and not being able to produce as much hair as before. Okay, so we've talked about microneedling. I'm not going to go into it too much, but we know that the Banisher microneedling, it has tiny little needles to create very controlled punctures in the skin. These trigger your body's natural healing process and helps with collagen production in the skin. Okay, and we've seen so many studies where if you're microneedling regularly, or the collagen is stained purple, if you're microneedled regularly, your skin actually gets thicker, it gets more dense. So you can see on the right side, that is skin that has been microneedled. And this actually, it continues to grow for 3 to 6 months even after a microneedling session. So it kind of just keeps on producing collagen and elastin. And we also, I don't know if you guys attended my other webinars, but I went through the 4 phases of what happens when you microneedle. So homeostasis, inflammation, proliferation, and skin collagen remodeling, okay? And the reason why I share this is that is very, very similar to hair regrowth and what kind of happens to the hair. So I'm going to go a little technical. So how does microneedling grow hair? And what I think is amazing about microneedling is that you are using your body's own stem cells and your body's own growth factor hormones to trick your hair to get out of that resting stage. Okay, so remember, I talked about the 4 different stages of hair growth. Some of the hair follicles are just chilling, they're sleeping, they're going dormant. So with microneedling, you're just like literally tricking your hair to be like, wake up, like time to get, producing new hairs. Okay, so the first way it does this is it activates this WNT beta catenin signaling pathways. So for example, in male pattern baldness, this pathway is suppressed. So the follicles are just sleeping, dormant, right? And so when you're actually, microneedling the scalp and it hits the stem cells in the hair bulge, this signals the cells to multiply and migrate down to the base of the follicle to start building a new hair shaft. So I think that's amazing. It's like you're literally like whacking them, being like, hey, wake up, right? Also, stem cells in the scalp, but stem cells naturally, they don't want to do more work. Okay. They're like, if I can chill, if I can rest, I'm not going to do anything. So microneedling breaks this state through growth factor release. So as your scalp heals, growth factors like PDGF and VEGF are released, and this triggers them to divide, the stem cells to divide. And this is actually what moves hair from that telogen state, that resting state, right, that we talked about, back to the anagen state. So we really want it to go back to the anagen state instead of just chilling at the telogen state. And then wound healing environment. So when the scalp is wounded by microneedling, it creates a temporary state of controlled inflammation. Now, inflammation, we think of inflammation as being really bad. Your body needs a little bit of inflammation to get things going, right? It's just like in life. You need a little bit of stress to, get going, to do things, right? So follicle regeneration, stem cell recruitment. There's also a study done in mice, actually, that says that micro-wounding has been shown to trigger neogenesis, the creation of brand new hair follicles when they didn't exist before, a process usually only seen during embryonic development. So from all the studies that I researched and read, the best way to microneedle hair is when the hair follicle is still there, okay? You cannot create new hair follicles where there are not new hair follicles. However, they have done study in animals where there's been new hair follicles that have been created. But basically, you really want to keep microneedling when you see the hair starting to thin, so it can really trigger the power switch again. Okay, so yeah, this is kind of like a table thing, but you get these new proteins. It activates the switch in the hair bulge. The stem cells begin rapid division and migration. It enters the anagen phase, and you get a new hair shaft. And then you see visible increase in hair density and thickness. So this is kind of what the hair follicle looks like. This is how it forms. Now, if you're going to remember anything in this diagram, I want you to look at the bulge of the hair follicle. So I'm going to get into this, but it's going to be very, very important that we trigger the bulge of the stem cell without going too deep into the scalp. Okay. So it's just very, very similar to microneedling your skin. You don't want to go too deep into the skin. You just want to trigger, right, that activation. So in summary, here are the 3 phases of microneedling for hair: inflammation, activation of the stem cells, and then the tissue remodeling. Yeah, this is actually just sent to us. This is our own customer. Yeah, it's our own customer too. So the baby hairs become thicker. So for me, I'm, really working on these little postpartum baby hairs. Okay. So I'm going to just go into a few studies that prove that microneedling helps with hair growth, because everything at Banish, it's very important that it's clinically based, and I read through these studies in and out. So, an example is microneedling in mice. You can see how just by microneedling, it got the mice to grow back its fur, right? And that was more effective than just putting the hair regrowth treatment alone. So the thing about putting the hair regrowth treatment is that if you're not going to stimulate that bulge in that hair follicle, it doesn't really matter, right? So microneedling is actually more effective than any hair growth treatment that you're going to do. And this is the study from Durat Sukesh, done in 2013, Microneedling Androgenetic Alopecia. So what I think is really interesting is you can see, again, microneedling produce better results than those who only use minoxidil, okay? You can see how in the microneedling treated group, the mean hair count was at a 91. Minoxidil treated group, it was at a 22. So they just got a lot more hair, you can see from this image. So again, I say this with everything. It doesn't matter how great your skincare products are. If it's not going to be absorbed into the skin and not do its thing, it doesn't matter how great it is if it's just sitting at the top of your skin, right? Same thing with hair regrowth. If the serums are not getting in, it doesn't matter. You need to stimulate the stem cell bulge, okay? So right here, hair bulge. Okay, so let's go through some studies. So yeah, this is kind of where I got the PDGF and VEGF growth factors that stimulate. So at present, microneedling has been found useful in promoting hair growth in combination with other growth agents. This was published in 2023. This one, Song, Usefulness of Home Use Microneedling Device. So it's actually been studied that home devices are perfectly adequate for hair growth. And I think it's important to say that because there haven't been too many studies about like using at-home devices. And in this study, they've also said that the improvement in hair count were shown in the combination group at month 6. Okay, so it does take some time, and you do have to be consistent with microneedling your scalp. It takes longer time than actual skin rejuvenation because remember, it goes through all of those phases and it takes a long time. Those phases may take years, right? So you have to be really consistent to do that. And I thought this was interesting. Androgenetic Alopecia Therapy Update published in 2023. It said microneedling with a depth of 0.6 was found to be more effective than a depth of 1.2 millimeters. So I've always said in these webinars, people think the deeper the needle, the better. People want deep, people want traumatic, people want blood, people want gore, people want all of that. But it actually doesn't do anything. In fact, it can, just like in the skin, it can create further visible scarring. And it's so important. Okay, if you guys don't take anything away from this webinar today, is that if you're gonna microneedle your scalp, you cannot overdo it because I do not want you to create scar tissue on your scalp because once you have a scar tissue, that hair follicle dies and you're not gonna be able to regrow your hair, okay? So in this study, 0.6 versus 1.2, the 0.6 group actually saw a superior clinical response in hair count and thickness. Okay, so the great thing about the Banisher is that you can really target the areas and it's not going to get stuck in your hair. So I was like trying to use this see now it got stuck. Okay, so whatever. Okay, so right before I started the Zoom, I was like, it was like literally like this. Maybe I'll just do it like that. Okay, new hair accessory. Okay, but you want to, you want to separate part and just press it down. And again, that 0.5 depth is the best, as we've seen in the studies. Okay, hair transplants. We're not going to talk about it. I'm not an expert in hair transplants. Okay, but that is a whole other thing if you want to do that. Okay, so how are we going to do this and how are we going to make sure we're doing this the right way? Again, I am all about safety. I am not about creating crazy, visual hooks to make people want to do this, blah, blah, blah. Remember, we're just trying to activate those stem cells and that is it. That is all we are doing, okay? No blood, no tears, no nothing. Okay, so the microneedling works best for early stage hair thinning, androgenic alopecia, widening hair parts, and receding hairlines in early phases. Now, the most important thing is in these studies, you want to start before that hair follicle has died. Okay, you want to stimulate it back to that new phase because once it's like done, and like completely dormant, it's going to be, I don't know if you can like get it back. So whenever you have baby hairs or whenever you see the hair thinning or when you see like a widening part, that is your signal to microneedle, okay? So in early phases, and that's why I say you got to do it now, do it yesterday, do it today, be consistent. In 2025, there's a big study, expert consensus on microneedling for hair regeneration suggests a tailored approach, okay? So if you are going to microneedle, remember that it is your scalp is actually thinner at the crown and thicker at the back. So maybe you want to use a 0.25, right, along this area, the crown area. And then what's great was with Banish, you can swap out the heads, right? We have our stack of replacement heads and microneedle the scalp at the back of the hair. Okay, so you can kind of target your approach based on scalp thickness. Okay, but again, if you're not going to take anything away from this is I don't want you to overdo it. Okay, because I don't want you to lose your hair and I don't want you to use bad devices. I don't want you to create infection in the scalp, which could lead to hair loss, all of that, okay? Because if you overdo it, it destroys the follicle of places with fibrous tissue, right? When you get a scar in the scalp, you get hair loss, okay? So this is why it is so important when you microneedle, you have to use the right device. And that's why I said, using the derma roller, it's like, I don't know, I haven't figured out how to do it. But even when you're using a motorized device, and I see people DIYing motorized devices on, whatever, I get really scared when people do it on their scalp, especially because you're not using a slip. People are just, dry microneedling their scalp. And again, we don't want to create scar tissue there. We just want to activate the stem cell bulge. So yeah, just be careful. I would not recommend any motorized devices here. A stamping device, super thin, that just triggers that part of the hair follicle is all you need. Okay, so as you get older, your scalp also gets thinner, okay, just like your skin, right? So, I would not recommend going any longer than a 1.0 millimeter length. 0.5 is really good, okay? We've seen the studies that the shorter perform better. And the important thing is with the scalp, you need to replace it after every use because the scalp is much thicker. It's like a 5 millimeter depth. It's much thicker. It has a lot more glands, things going on. So it is going to dull the needles much faster than if you use it on your skin. And if you have alopecia, your scalp is much thinner, then use a shorter needle at 0.5. I would not recommend going longer than that. Okay, so how you are going to use the Banisher. So I guess I'll do a little quick demo. I'm going to pop off this old head because that was for the back of the hair. Okay, so I'm using the smaller one. So you're going to start with a clean scalp. Okay, so just make sure you wash your hair. I actually like to blow dry my hair when I'm going to microneedle because I feel like my scalp is cleaner than if it's like air dried and moist. I like to double shampoo. I would not recommend using like a dandruff shampoo or any shampoo with actives or putting any like conditioner right at the scalp or anything. Just a clean scalp is all you need. And then you're going to section your hair to thinning areas. So for me, I have these baby hairs. So I'm going to press here along the area. Make sure you use a brand new head and you clean it. I did that before the webinar. But in any areas you see like more like open spaces, you're going to stamp the Banisher there. Okay. And you can see just how well the Banisher fits along the hairline, along the scalp, right? With the derma rollers and the other motorized devices. I think with the motorized devices, your hair would also get stuck in there if it's just moving along. Okay, and then you can also like part your hair, right? So if you have a part, and I actually have, you can see, I actually have like acne in my scalp. So I would just avoid those areas, but you can, again, part different sections of your hair. Now, in all the research I've seen, it is not recommended to apply a hair growth serum right afterwards, okay? Because the scalp is really sensitive. If you're going to apply a hair growth serum afterwards, it is recommended to wait 24 hours, okay? And also, same logic like with microneedling your skin, I would not do hot yoga the same day, right? And I also would not wash the hair for 24 hours just so that everything can not be dried out. Okay, so that's how you do it. And then remember at the back, a lot of people's scalp is thicker at the back, so you can interchange the head and use like the 1.0 for the back of the neck. So I already feel it. It feels pretty good. It's like you're getting a head scratch, head massage. And funny thing is, Banish's needles are literally finer than a human hair. So you're not going to run the risk of creating scar tissue with Banish's needles because they're so fine. I'm not sure about other devices, but you just really want to be careful about that. Again, how Banish is different. We got replacement heads. You can self-sanitize this. And what is so great is that you guys, you don't need to buy a whole new device for hair regrowth. You can use the same exact Banisher that you use for your skin, but because we have replacement heads, just make sure you're not, using the same head that you use for your scalp, right? And bringing that onto your face or other areas. So yeah, you just need to get different heads for that. Also very precision focused, so you can really target around where those baby hairs are starting to either form or where you see hair thinning. Okay, so for the Banisher, you need to replace it after every use. I say for the skin and for your face, depends 3 to 4 times, right? But because if you are going to microneedle your scalp, it is a much larger area and the scalp is much thicker and it has a lot more of, the oils and flaky skin and all of that. So you really need to replace it frequently in order to keep the needles sharp. okay? You can just replace it after every time you do it. And this is why we also sell the heads and 6-packs, because consistency is really, really important for this. And what's so great is, I don't know if you guys have used the Banisher on your scalp. I already feel it. I feel like it's like someone like scratching my scalp a little bit after a microneedle. Okay, so what makes Banish different, or like microneedling your scalp really good, is that you're not using heat or energy. Again, we don't want to damage the scalp and, you know, not have hair or kill the hair follicle. We want to boost product absorption, but again, make sure we're not using the hair growth serums the same day, wait a day. Okay, so frequency. Okay, so I would say if you're just starting off, 0.5 every other week. Start with that. Okay, if you're going to use the 1.0 like in the back of the scalp, I would do that every other week or every 4 weeks. But don't overdo it, because the hair growth cycle we've seen takes a really long time to go through it. And you need to do this for 6 months to see results. So it is different than microneedling your skin, where after people microneedle their skin, they notice, you know, the scars are smoothed out. They notice their skin is plumper, more glowy, all of that. The hair, it goes through those cycles. So maybe it's not ready. It's going to take some time and some consistency to do that. Okay. So yeah, really the benefit is that you're creating your own stem cells. You're triggering your own growth factors. And I think that's really important, because no matter, like, I know stem cells are very popular right now, and putting things on your skin is very popular, but if your skin is not going to react to that, and if your skin is not going to like absorb it or know what to do with it, or if the language that it's speaking is not the same in a way your body can receive it, it doesn't matter how great it is, right? So microneedling is so good because it's your own body. Your body recognizes its own language. And then don'ts. Okay, so again, don'ts. Don't use on an irritated scalp, on infected scalp. I said that I had some like, you know, like zits kind of in my scalp. Do not microneedle over that. Go around it. Remember to do it only on clean hair, okay? And not to use any crazy actives in the shampoo the day you do it. Healing time is very, very, very important, okay? So no more than every 2 weeks starting off. If you can tolerate that for a few months, you can go to once a week, but I would not do it any more than that. Replace your needles every single time. The scalp is much thicker and denser than your skin, so you have to replace them. Do not use hair regrowth serum right after. Wait 24 hours. I would, you know, for me, I would use a little bit like a rosemary oil or maybe a little castor oil, like 24 hours after. And then if you're undergoing chemo or any kind of treatment like that, do not microneedle, because your body is not ready to go through that whole process of releasing all of that. And then consult a professional if unsure. So let's see, we got like 2 minutes. Realistic expectations, 6 months consistently every other week. Microneedling is not an instant cure. However, when used consistently and correctly, it can really help scalp health, hair thickness, stimulate follicles and early hair loss. Thank you so much. Do not forget to microneedle, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.